Thank you for having me. And welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I'm open to answering any questions at all at any time that come up. And I'm excited to dive into, this topic of sacred sexuality, which has been a passion of mine since I was in my very early 20s and I was on a spiritual path of awakening and healing and diving into all the healing arts that I could after having a very kind of extreme Kundalini awakening that happened in a crisis period of my life. And so I went into, this path of healing and spirituality. And along that path, no one was talking about sexuality, and it was very much actually not included in the meditation practices and all of the work that I seemed to be doing that was upper chakras focused. So then one day I saw a flyer for a workshop for sacred sexuality, tantric workshop. And I decided, I just knew I needed to do it, and I was very much guided to do it. My boyfriend at the time broke up with me because he thought it was a really bad idea to do something like that. And I went anyways, and I ended up studying with that teacher and doing some pretty long intensives after the weekend. And I was very young at the time, and it was my first experience of sacred sexuality, and I'm so grateful to 20 years later having been in this field and able to come at it from a different perspective around, so what is sacred sexuality and what does that mean? And, it ranges from so many different perspectives on this huge topic that it's going to be interesting, but we're going to just kind of look at it from a broad perspective. And one of the things I want to say is that many of the workshops and the tantric work that's out there is under the guise of sacred sexuality, but really it's more just casual sex and orgies. So it's, I've been there, I've been able to kind of see through it. And so I'm, just letting everyone know that, to take a real look at what sacred sexuality is for you, right? How is sex sacred to you? And I really going to look at this in a broader way of anything that's consensual and safe and that you consider as sacred. Guess what? Sacred sexuality. Your sex is sacred, and I like to say, the sacred is sexy. Everything comes from sex. This planet is all about sexual, and when I say sex, we're going to be using that word in terms of a much broader energy. Sex is energy. We're going to be looking at it from energy perspective. And that's really what, sacred sexuality at its core is about, is in ancient times. Sacred sexuality has been around forever. It was the first religion until patriarchy came and made sex the original sin. And then we've had thousands of years of separation from sexuality as healthy and normal and wonderful and spiritual, which also, of course, goes with a separation from our bodies, right? So you can't be practicing sacred sexuality but not think that your body's sacred, right? Your body you have to have a connection deeply to your body. And I will extend that even further to that we are organisms on the larger body of the earth. So to practice any sacred sexuality, it really does go back to earth-based practices and connection, not just with spirit, but with the earth, and running the sexualness and the connection of the earth energy through your body. So I do think that's a really important part of any sacred sexuality practice, that if you're really wanting to, I want to explore sacred sexuality in some way, get yourself connected to the earth, start running your orgasms with the earth, start running energy through your body of just connecting to the earth. That can be like the most basic and first practice that you'll always be expanding more on in this experience. If you really want to run big energy, you run it with the earth. And with your own body. So one of the questions I think was, well, can you practice sacred sexuality with a partner? Absolutely. And it should be practiced first on your own. That's always my perspective, is you have to learn the art and the practices within your own body before you can play with another. And you continue to do that. I have always had a very strong solo practice. When I first went into this field, I was single for years. I had my own practices. I learned Tantra, doing solo practices, and then having like Tantra partners, but more like Tantra buddies of people that I would choose that were also in this field, and we would work together. But, it's with this type of practices too, it's, again, a question of what works for you, right?
Can I have you maybe slow down just a little bit and tell us what is Tantra? So I find myself wondering about, because you were sort of connecting like body energy to earth energy. And so I find myself feeling like you're drawing connections between our sort of vital energy, like our life force energy, and I'm assuming the life force energy of the earth. And then you were describing Tantra as it sounds like it's kind of a construct, but I think maybe we might need you to slow down and describe that a little bit, what that is.
Yes. Tantra is a subset of sacred sexuality. It's part of sacred sexuality, and it's the probably the most well-known and most popularized form of sacred sexuality. But Tantra is not all about sacred sexuality. Tantra is a philosophy, and it has many, many different ways that it's practices in different subsets. So with Tantra, an easy example to understand with Tantra and all the different ways it can be practiced is that the Dalai Lama, so you can practice sacred sexuality even celibate. The Dalai Lama is celibate, but him and his monks practice sacred sexuality, and that they practice Tantric Buddhism, and they run the energy from the earth and up into, with deities here and through the body, and that vital sexual energy and life force, right? They're just not genitally focusing it. They're using it internal. So that would be called white Tantra.
So okay, so now I'm kind of teasing out some aspects here. So if we're thinking about like we're having sex with a partner, right?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times we are sort of conditioned to view and perceive sex as a way to be intimate, as a way to express your feelings for somebody, as a way to get your affection needs met, right? Sometimes we use sex as a way to validate the relationship or to validate each other or ourselves. And it's often perceived as something, it's a physical act. It's, genital to genital contact and or some configuration of that. And so what I'm hearing you say is that you seem to be describing sex and sexuality more as a relationship to a type of energy in your body. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's foremost about the energy in your body. So sex becomes about energy, not effort, and nothing about external. It's actually running the energy, becoming your own channel of this connection to whatever your source is, right? You can call it God, goddess, whatever it is, the earth. You're connected there first. And so in any sacred sexuality practice, first you're connecting to source, and then you're connecting to your partner and seeing them as source energy. And you've learned that you can run the energy through all the chakras. So it's not a game anymore of just pelvic, connection, right? And pelvic sneeze orgasms. You're able to breathe, you're practicing breath work, and it becomes a dance and a meditation, which is why it really is an art. It incorporates all these healing arts, right? And these sensual arts and erotic arts. Mm-hmm. So breath work, meditation practice. The original yoga postures are what we use in our lovemaking in Tantra. So we use sacred geometry. We learn yoga. We do this dance. But first, the white Tantra, again, is the internal practice. And really, you want to start with learning white Tantra and your own, whatever you want to call it, your own internal practice. And then you can go to the red Tantra, which is the sexual practices with a partner, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And where do we begin with the white Tantra practices, or maybe just an example of what that looks like?
Yeah, I actually have a great resource that I wanted to share that I want to point out, because I've read hundreds of books on sacred sexuality and tantra, and I just think Michael Murdow was one of my first teachers, and there's a great story about him I'm going to share. But he wrote this book, Sacred Sexuality, A Manual for Living Bliss. And it is just like so comprehensive, and yet it's really a manual with so many techniques and also history about sacred sexuality and what is tantra compared to sacred sexuality, solo practices to do with a partner. This is the book I highly recommend.
Great.
Yeah. So what I'll say about that too is, so Michael Murdow wrote a number of books on tantra and sacred sexuality, and used to teach those as a main part of his healer work. And there was even a point, so he was doing a workshop at a Unity church locally. And he had me, we didn't know each other at the time, this was when I first met him, come up on stage to show energy, flowing and moving energy. And my body just burst into like kriyas of energy waves and rocking and orgasmic energy. It was like, everyone could see it, right? So in this
at the Unity Church.
At the Unity Church. So it was like he had this huge following after that of women especially that were like all over, this, how could this work? How does this work? And because when you see this happen, especially if you're right there, you feel the experience in your body a lot of times too. Mm-hmm. So Michael is, doing great with the teaching of sacred sexuality, but there's still, I'm bringing this up because there's still so much repression out there. So he actually became a Unity minister, and they told him, absolutely not. You are no longer teaching sacred sexuality or tantra at all. You're not even using those words anymore. And it was like this big, thing that he had going on with like the church and so forth, of trying to say, hey, how can we leave this part out? But it's still ongoing. That they just, nope, like he had to just move away from all this great work that he was doing of bridging these two, the spirituality and sexuality. So I found that there's still, and maybe checking in, with your own selves, because I know I was this way in a lot of ways, of kind of hierarchical around things and sexuality, right, and spirituality. So my hierarchical was, well, tantra is sacred sexuality, but kink and other types of sex aren't. And now I know from expanding with the erotic blueprint work that I'll mention a little bit of, that we are all imprinted differently with different types of eroticism. They all exist within us, and that they're all equal, right? So it's not that like people that are doing kink practices aren't doing sacred sexuality. A lot of them are. They're intentionally pushing the edges to liminal states of new awakenings in consciousness. And they're definitely running energy all through their body, not just in one area. So there's many different ways to perceive it, but there's definitely a lot of, again, repression still, I've approached local yoga studios of teaching tantra classes and intimacy classes, and they're like, no, we're just about spirituality, not sexuality. And I'm just not seeing the difference at this point in my life, but a lot of people still are holding that as, a very big chasm that keeps us out of our bodies and out of our power, in my opinion.
So in your practices and in your work, what would you say, maybe just like kind of a vague example, but a couple comes to you and they're at an impasse in their relationship, and the sex has become a point of contention in the relationship. Where do you start with them?
It's a great question. I would definitely start with, doing erotic detective work that would be very broad, of like, well, does somebody have a hormonal issue? Where's each person's libido? Where's their sexual health and wellness at? What's going on in terms of their schedules? What's their time spent with kids, home environment? I mean, on and on. But I would definitely look at I'd look at it from all these different perspectives, but I'd be looking at the energy, right? Where is their sexual energy? Do they have any alive and well, or are they just bottomed out with, like, you know, there's no intimacy because there's no connection in their own bodies, right?
I like that connection you're making, that like they have to be connected to their own bodies in order to be connected to each other.
Yes, exactly. You know, we so often forget that. It's like we end up blaming the partner for something. Check in with yourself first in terms of where you're at with your own energy field and how you're moving energy and connecting in your body. And then I would definitely always look at the blueprints. So are they just speaking different languages in the bedroom, right? The 5 blueprints are different sex languages. Very cool that yesterday it just came out in the media that Juliana House, she's like a Dancing with the Stars famous celebrity. Yeah, who's married to another celebrity. She just came out in the media saying that she hired Jaya, who is my mentor for the Erotic Blueprints, and it saved her marriage to learn the blueprint work. So it's great it's getting out there more, because it really can. It was just simply they were having a translation issue of their intimacy in terms of what each needed. So, yeah. And then with any...
I was just going to say, for those of us who haven't heard about the Erotic Blueprints, so the Erotic Blueprints is also something that Sasha is certified in. And this is, Jaya is a sexologist, I think. And she came up with this concept of, I think, is it 5 erotic blueprints?
Yep.
And it's basically the concept that we all are sort of imprinted with a way of expressing ourselves in a sexual fashion. And so there's like 5 different types, more or less, of these blueprints. And in our last live group coaching program we did, Sasha came and talked a lot about those. And I believe you said you'll make mention of them later today. But I wanted to just, for those of us here who are not familiar, that it's kind of a framework for understanding how sometimes we can have not mismatched, but that we can have different blueprints that perhaps aren't translating if you are not aware of what's going on.
Yeah, that was a great explanation of that. And yeah, I'll just right now even give a little bit more on the blueprints, is that they're similar in the 5 love languages of Gary Chapman's work. And essentially, it's such a powerful framework to look at because it takes so much judgment away. And it really does help with partners to realize it's not incompatibility. It's a translation issue. You're speaking different languages. So with a coach like myself, I can teach you how to speak the same language, how to evolve, and how to expand and heal in the particular blueprints that are your main ones. Because the blueprints also have shadow sides. So we look at, are you in the positive side of the blueprint, or are you in the shadow side, and how do we get you to the positive side? So the 5 are energetic is 1, sensual, sexual, kinky, and then the 5th is called shapeshifter, which includes all of them. So really, sacred sexuality would seem like it's all energetic. And Tantra is very much about the energetic, and then Tantra includes the sensual with especially the Neo-tantric movement's all about sensual full body massages and that type of thing. But what's interesting is that that's what's perceived, that's kind of like what's put out there. But when you go to an actual workshop, from my experience, there's a lot more of the sexual blueprints, right? And that energy that's there be under the guise of this other energy and sensual work. And I think that can be dangerous. I think it's really important to call out things what they are, and to keep people more safe in these types of environments than from what I've seen. So, but with that said, there's also, whereas some people think that, well, energetic sex is better, sacred sexuality is better. No, they're all just different blueprints, and they're all different playgrounds that we can play. All 5 are different playgrounds we can learn to play in.
So maybe it would help to illustrate what would be the difference between, for example, an energetic sexual interaction versus, I think you said you used the word sexual as another blueprint in and of itself, right?
Yes. Yep. So energetic would be very much about eye gazing and running energy through the eyes generally, running energy through the whole body. So energetics would like have anticipation and tease around coming together, right? And they would really play with their energy. They would see sex as a meditation, right? Not fucking, not just showing up and going, let's do this, I want to get off. Like, nothing wrong with that. And you can experience transcendent sex that way, right? Mm-hmm. But energetic would be, let's meditate, let's run energy through our chakras, let's open our eyes to each other, let's connect all the chakras, let's do all this other connection work before genitals ever even come into play together. Energetic would also be very slow. It would be about, you know, and it incorporates a lot of stillness, right? So you actually would be still during sex and just moving the energy and having orgasms in the stillness. Yeah.
That sounds like something you have to learn.
Yeah, and I teach it. I can teach you. Yeah, I can teach you.
Maybe you can give us some beginner exercises today.
Yeah, I will. I'll say, you know, the most easy, first basic thing around sacred sexuality and tantra and just, you know, practices in general to open up your energy more, right? So simple that things we forget easily. I just use the acronym BSMV, right? Breath, right? Are you breathing? How are you breathing? The more breath that you can expand in, right? We teach breath work so that you can become a better lover with your breath, like expanding and different types of breath that you can do with a partner where you're consciously moving the energy between you through your breath, as well as eyes and genitals and everything else. So just essentially, like, you want to notice that as soon as you stop breathing, right, and that's when we tighten up, and that's when we're going to come and have a, like, pelvic sneeze orgasm. Yeah. Which nothing wrong with that. Those are fun too.
I like that image, a pelvic sneeze.
Yeah. Achoo! Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're breathing and you're like about to come and then to a climax, right? And then instead you're like, and you keep breathing and you keep breathing and you keep breathing, your energy is going to expand out, and you can also pull the energy up to your brain. So now you're having full body orgasm, not just genital orgasm. And now what's great about it is if breathing's tough for you, the next one is sounding. So the B is breathing, the S is sounding. If you're sounding, you're breathing. So it makes it easier to just remember to sound, right? To continuously sound. It also, the sexual chakra and the throat chakra are very connected. And when we open up our throat chakra, we actually, it's like a magnet, and it pulls the sexual energy up into the brain as we're sounding. So what's great is if you actually sound, you can quadruple the length of your climax, and it expands energetically more. So you not only can expand into these waves of orgasm that we want to go for to create in sacred sexuality, because you're creating higher states of consciousness that way. Okay? You're opening up new neural pathways. So with the sound, and I think it's, you know, something that with sacred sexuality, you can sound a certain tone that works with the chakra, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're someone who's uncomfortable with sounding like I was, it took me time to practice, and I just used the syllable A-H, which opens up the heart chakra. So I was also opening up my heart. It was like, you just keep sounding, right? Instead of shutting down and like just boop, energy down through the pelvis. So you want it up. So movement is, are you like a frog getting dissected on, table, or like, are you moving through your pelvis? Are you moving your spine? Are you undulating, right? Are you being playful with letting the energy move through your body? And see how all of these practices, you'd have to be really paying attention to your own body and not worried about what you look like and what your partner's doing.
Right? That's going to pull you right out, right?
Yeah. So that's where it's the meditation comes in, where I'm aware of everything that's going on in my body, and I'm in sync and creating this, you know, moving with the energy, and I'm also aware of my partner at the same time. But it's not one or the other. Yeah. And this is for solo practices too, and I recommend start practicing first with yourself, with self-pleasure, breath, sound, movement, right? And then the V is just visualization. And what's great about visualization is once you have the intention for the energy to move, it does, and you don't have to keep focusing on it. So essentially, you just want to always be focusing the energy in your body moving, and your partner's moving up from the genitals into the head, and even up through the crown, right? Many people, if you've seen any visuals of Tantra, you may have seen a couple sitting in Yab Yum where the chakras are completely aligned, right? They're practicing sacred geometry in that position. Chakras are completely aligned, energy's being run up and down the spine, back and forth, and it's creating this incredible bliss and multi-orgasmic experience through all of their bodies. And so first we learn to do it in ourselves, and then we can bring it to a partner.
And for those of you, I may have mentioned chakras once or twice in this particular course in passing, but for those of us that aren't really 100% familiar with that, the chakras are these energetic vortices that in the yogic and tantric tradition correspond to different parts of the body, in particular the top of your crown, your third eye, your throat, your heart, your solar plexus, solar plexus, the sacral, and then the root. And there are other chakras as well, like in your hands and in your feet and above the crown. And there are also what are called nadis, which are, if this is the highway, then the nadis would be kind of like the back road chakras throughout your body. But basically they're sort of areas where energy is concentrated, and they can evolve also as we grow up through different kinds of developmental stages. And then I believe once we reach adulthood, they're all more or less in various degrees of balance or imbalance, or being opened and moving in a way that feels good, or feeling more blocked or stuck in some way.
Yeah. And sacred sexuality, especially the Neo-tantric movement, is really based on opening up these energy pathways more, so that we're achieving higher states of consciousness and unity with the divine, and really expanding ourselves in ways that we just keep expanding, and there's like no ceiling on any of this too, which is pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. But it is important to have a good guide, and to do the practices in a way that paying a lot of attention to your own body and system, because you can fry yourself, you can blow chakras, you can do all kinds of things because it's an electric current, really. Your sexual energy and this life force is like fire. And we want to learn to, be balanced in how we play with it. So I just think it's really important to have the right guide and so forth. So like having that book would be amazing, but, hire a coach like me too, because you need an extra guide as well. So. Mm-hmm. I want to, for those that, are, I want to share more on like, not the mundane, it's not about that, but I think because sometimes it can seem with sacred sexuality type of thing, it becomes very much like, well, what? How can I do that? Was this really like achievable and that type of thing? So I want to kind of take it down a little bit here just for a moment, and say that the other resource that I highly, highly recommend is Jenny Wade's book. So she's an academic who did incredible research and wrote this book, Transcendent Sex When Lovemaking Opens the Veil. And so I'm just going to read a little bit about what this book is, because I think it'll be quick, but I think this will really help to understand that you don't have to go down any different type of path or spirituality or anything else to actually have sacred sexuality experiences, or let's call it transcendent sex, right? Mm. So when Lovemaking Opens the Veil, essentially she has narratives of 91 people who went to bed with their lovers and suddenly had an awe-inspiring experience. that forever changed the way they understood themselves and reality and the power of sex and the body as a path to realization. So she calls it the best kept secret in history is that ordinary people just like you, can suddenly, without any warning or preparation, find themselves transported to otherworldly realms when making love, as though God's lightning bolt shot through the bedroom, transforming everything. Sex can trigger amazing altered state experiences without drugs, meditation, or tantric or other special practices. And when it does, nothing's ever the same again. So this book is about how lovemaking sweeps people into glorious new dimensions, rips the veil between the worlds, and produces ecstasies 1,000 times more powerful than the most exquisite orgasm. Lovemaking so spectacular really does become a religious experience, even for atheists and agnostics. Yeah. So then she does discuss, which I like too, the history of transcendent sex or sacred sexuality was the basis of the sacred sex of ancient times. So the mystery religions of Egypt, right? Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, China, and India. And then today it's alive and well, but we don't talk about it. And these states that are triggered by lovemaking are identical. This was her research, right? Academic research. The states triggered by lovemaking are identical to the highest states identified in shamanism, yoga, Buddhism, mystical Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And that includes shape-shifting, being possessed by or channeling animals, plants, and supernatural beings, seeing divine avatars, reliving past lives, having paranormal powers, awakening to the enlightenment of nirvana, being one with God, right? And her research says that this kind of sex will happen at least once to 1 out of every 8 people. So someone in this group, hopefully more now that you know about it.
Sign me up, Sasha.
Right? Yes. But I love to if you're somebody really interested in exploring this path, you get the one that's more the like yogic tantric one, and then what's the research? What's the reality around what most people are experiencing?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because just a little TMI here. Yeah. But I did once have an experience where I was with a boyfriend and I blacked out and I thought was a hallucination. And he was terrified. He was like really worried about me. Right. And I thought I had an epileptic fit or something like that. But it was like there was this whole storyline that I went into for like the space of 3 minutes while I was like passed out. Yeah. But it only ever happened to me once. But right. Now that you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, I guess it could happen.
Yes, that's definitely what happened. Yeah. And when we don't have the proper sex education, including the energy of sex, right, that we should be taught, we get confused and it can look like an epileptic seizure easily. And we can go in and out of states of consciousness and have, shaking, profound shaking and different experiences in the physical body as we have what, the yogis and like Christ experienced and so forth in their, transcendent experiences. It's just that we haven't been taught that the line of easiest, least resistance to these states is actually our own sexuality and our own connection in our body.
So I hear the breath as being kind of like that first place to start, right? And you were talking about the white tantra and that going in and being connected to your own body's energy, and that breath work is kind of like the first and sort of a basic way of beginning to start to make contact with that. Yeah. Is there something that we could do here on the call together, like a basic first step in how to play with our breath, that we could start to play with that?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Let me see, what would be one of the easiest ways? Well, let's do a little visualization practice and just see where it goes of what feels the most to open up. So we'll close our eyes, and if you're in a place you can do that, and just relaxing and allowing your body to just really sink into whatever is holding it right now, whatever it is, and just taking some deep breaths. And the first thing we always want to do is connect to the earth. So we're going to release any energy that we want to release or that needs to be released down through our feet, opening up the energy in the bottom of our feet, letting any energy out. And then imagine like even like you have a tap root that comes out of your base chakra and your sacrum, and you're just tapping down into the center of the earth. And then you're going to pull up energy from the earth. You can just ask the earth for the contribution of her energy, orgasmic energy, whatever you want to call it, just earth energy. You're going to imagine that that energy is just, well, it's not imagining because we are actually doing it. We're beings that we direct energy. We're actually doing this. So you are going to pull the energy up from the earth, coming through your feet, and see it going up through your legs, up into your genitals, and then really letting it just like move around if it's comfortable for you, and light up and just like really play with your second chakra area, your genital area. And you're just going to keep letting it go all the way up through your belly, and it's going up the center of the spine, and then into the breast, into the chest area. Maybe your shoulders go back a little bit. Energy's moving around, expanding out. And up into your throat. And just keep going. And it goes up into the third eye area, which is on your forehead. And then up through the top of your head. And then let it go out as far as you'd like and just fountain out around you. And just notice if you can feel like, oh, I'm tapped into the earth, I'm grounded, and I'm filled up. I'm like this wave of energy and awareness now. Good. And then a major part of what we teach in terms of how to direct breath and energy is by pulsing or playing with in different ways our pelvic floor. So that feels like as if you are going to stop the flow of pee. You pull up on your pelvic floor. This is a very basic description of it. So I want you to just do that a little bit and notice if it increases any energy in your body if you pulse that pelvic floor. And it's okay if you're not experiencing anything right away. Just play with it and just see what you might notice. What we learn with the pelvic floor is that we can start to pump energy up to the brain. The sexual energy the pelvic floor becomes like the light switch that moves the energy up into the head as we wish to, or down. Sometimes we want to move it down in lovemaking. But generally, when we're first learning, we're moving the energy up to our head. So you're going to just allow yourself to pulse that PC muscle and try a breath where you actually are going to take a deep breath in, and you're imagining that you're breathing up from that core center of the earth. So you're breathing up through the body as the energy is moving up like we were just moving it. Good. And when you get to your genitals, you're going to pull up on the pelvic floor like an elevator. While you're pulling the breath up, you're pulling the breath up to your chest. When you get to your chest, you think you can't, it's like when you get to the point that you can't take it any more breath, you think, you're actually going to take a sip of a breath. So the shoulders go back and you sip the breath and then swallow it. And feel for energy in the back of your brain at the same time. So it's pull up energy from the center of the earth, see it moving up through your body, pull up on the pelvic floor as you're doing it. When you get to the chest, you take another sip of air, swallow, feel for energy in the back of the brain, and then you add one other piece as you start pulsing that PC muscle again. And when you need to exhale, just exhale with control and not like violently or quickly. I'll do it once without talking. So if you want to open your eyes and get a sense of what it looks like, I'll try to exaggerate it, and maybe I will talk a little bit. But essentially, yeah, so I'm pulling energy up through my feet from the center of the earth as I'm breathing in. And I'm breathing in through my mouth, whatever is more comfortable for you. The energy is coming up. It's coming up through my genitals. I'm pulling up on my pelvic floor like an elevator. Now the breath is here. I think I can't take in anymore, but I'm going to take another sip. Swallow. Feel for energy in the back of my brain and pulse my PC muscle. And breathe out with control. So that's a lot at once, but did anybody get that or feel anything?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's tricky the first time, but the more that you, again, right, that's when I learned these practices. I went and practiced them every day by myself before I went and did anything with a partner. So that breath became so natural that I was able to then be having an experience with a partner, and I'm about to have an orgasm, and I use that breath to just blow everything up even higher, right? Mm-hmm. Energetically into the head instead of just out through the genitals. So yeah. And then we add in more layers to a breath like that, where you would actually sound different tones when you release the breath and things like that. So it gets more complex, but once you learn, you can have spontaneous, energetic orgasms just doing that breath.
Wow.
Yeah. And for those that don't want to get that complicated, just start breathing more in the bedroom and see what happens for you. Just do breath, sound, movement, and visualization, and see if you don't have some totally new experiences with that.
And it is really so amazing how much we forget to breathe, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, just the other day I was like, oh, I was like, I've been breathing so shallow, and just taking a full breath, we just don't do it very often.
Yeah. Shallow breathing is shallow orgasms. Yep. And it's great when we are doing these practices and we actually have a partner, that's on board. So we coach each other, how do you breathe? Breathe more. And we actually pronounce the sound of the breath, or the sounding more, so that they won't feel so uncomfortable. So they'll join with us. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm. Do you have any recommendations on how to approach a partner with something like this? Let's say you're someone who's kind of into it and you're like, oh, I'd like to try some of these breathing exercises and maybe work on this together. It might be something that we can do, but you're not 100% sure of how receptive your partner may be, or maybe that your partner may be a little bit hesitant for whatever reason. Have you found in your practice that there are certain ways of approaching this with either a partner who's not familiar with this, or maybe a little hesitant or fearful? Do you have any recommendations on how you might approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. Gently and from the perspective, of course, that it's not that they're doing anything wrong and that they're not a good lover. It's that you're interested in exploring something just a little different and more. Mm-hmm. And would you go on this journey with me, honey? Because, I happened to see a video on tantric something, and I thought, well, that really is interesting. I want to try that, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe, especially if it's a male partner that's more visual, maybe sharing some videos that you can find would be practical for that situation. Maybe some reading, definitely hiring a coach, because even if I did an hour virtual session with a couple, it often really helps for all of the answers to get, things get answered, and to make it playful and not scary, and to keep everybody together on the same page. It's nice to have, a third party that can help you with that. But I think really it's just, another great new avenue to do it through is if you're going to be playing with, and I think everybody should be, the blueprints, right?
Mm.
You can say, well, your partner, look at their blueprints, look at your own, and go, you're probably actually, if you're interested in this type of practice, you're probably running some strong energetic blueprint somewhere. So you can say, oh, well, my blueprint is right now very high energetic. So I would like to explore these intimacy practices that are for energetics. Would you come along for the ride with me? Right?
Yeah. And you had mentioned the resources before. Would it be possible to have those? Because then I can post them in the dashboard so everybody can access those.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send the quiz and the books and all that. Yeah.
Well, we are at the end of our time here anyway. But I wanted to give a big thank you for coming here and for sharing your experience with us and your guidance and for walking us through the experiential. I got a lot out of it, and I am going to take all those resources that you shared with us, and I will be posting them inside the dashboard for everybody with the course materials and the replay so that you can come back to this at a later time. And also, if you'd be willing to maybe type some feedback in the Facebook group on if you want to share a note with Sasha, or even if you'd like to book a consultation with her or something like that, I'll also give you her contact information as well.